Consciousness is a dream that I pursue.
Comme les angles à l'œil fauve, je vendrai dans ton alcôve, et vers toi glisserai sans bruit, avec les hommes de la nuit.
He fumbles at your spirit as players at the keys. Before they drop full music on, he stuns you by degrees.
Sate sangue diwan, tros ankesiade, facilis descensus aver. Noctes atque dies pater atri angelotis, sed revocare gradum superasque.
Double, toilet, trouble, fire, burn, cauldron, bubble.
Full fathom 5, thy father lies. Of his bones are coral made. Those are pearls that were his eyes. Nothing of him.
Come, sealing night, scarf up the tender eye of pitiful day. Light thickens and the crow makes wing to the rooky wood. Good things of day begin to droop and drowse, whilst night's black agents to their praise do rouse. Thou marvelst at my words, but hold thee still.
This is Twilight on the Western Door.
Sator, Aripo, Tenet, Opera, Rotas.
Consciousness is a dream that I pursue.
Hi, everyone. This is Mason Winfield, the host of Twilight on the Western Door, our program of interviews and discussions with cutting-edge experts in subjects of the supernatural, the spiritual, and the paranormal. You know, American imaginations have been swept into the high-tech mythology of the UFOs as by no other form of contemporary folklore. There might be some legitimacy to the question, but I'm personally suspicious of reports that coincide with a modern media craze. It takes a bit to get me persuaded. Nevertheless, we can hardly ignore the matter. The UFO phenomenon is one of the more mind-defying systems of thought that has so far been developed, except for the fact that people say they see things, as with ghosts. There's very little consistency. In the 1960s, the fine British paranormal researcher John Michell began his career searching for the truth about UFOs. 2 decades of worldwide study had not yet confirmed their existence, but the phenomenon was not without its patterns. UFOs, Michel found, were so often reported about old religious sites that he called places of ancient sanctity that Michel started to become more interested in the sites themselves. Other patterns involved UFO zones about the world, 2 of them in western New York. Curious beastie sightings, Bigfoot, lake serpents, ghosts, seem to be part of the matter too. It's developed that even natural phenomena like solar flares are also implicated in the UFO mess. Even dates can be suspicious. The traditional beginning of the UFO craze in America was June 24th, 1947, St. John's Day, which was a heavy festival to the secret societies and near enough Midsummer's Day to be it. Even mythic patterns have been replayed. The most commonly reported visual phenomena, bright discs, big serpents, big monkeys, are all simple primal images of Jungian significance. They mean something to the unconscious mind. Of course, there could always be another explanation for why so many people report the same thing at the same time, that it was there. I remember reading a series of articles in one of the local papers in western New York. It was actually Buffalo's biggest paper, the Buffalo News. And these articles were so logical and so well-reasoned that I developed a deep admiration for the writer. He wasn't an advocate. He wasn't a denier. He was an examiner. I always wanted to meet him, but could never find him myself. I'd call the news and try to track him down, and the news would never give me his phone number. They probably thought I was one of the men in black trying to track him down. But one night in the summer of 2005, I was leading a ghost walk of East Aurora, fell in a conversation with a couple of folks that were attending, and I discovered that one of them was the guy I was looking for. Bob Galganski and I have been friends and co-researchers ever since. Tonight, we are honored to have as the fifth guest of Twilight on the Western Door, the researcher and engineer, Bob Galganski. Bob, are you ready to take a little walk into the twilight with us tonight?
Oh, I'm always ready, Mason, always.
That's fantastic. Bob, would you give us a nutshell 3 to 4 minute discussion of yourself and how you came into this field of study?
Okay, I'm from Niagara Falls, New York, born there, and my parents' financial situation was such that I never even considered the possibility of going to college, so I followed my brother's footsteps and took carpentry classes over at what was then called Trott Vocational High School. After that, I kicked around at a few jobs, was never able to really get a carpentry job per se, and I was just about considering going into the service, joining the Air Force or something, when I figured I'd give it a shot and I would try to go to what was then known as Erie County Technical Institute. It's now Erie County Community College. Well, I went into, obviously, construction technology. I went through there with almost straight A's. So toward the end of that little tenure, I decided, well, let's try the University of Buffalo. I'll try civil engineering, figuring if I didn't do well there, I'd go back to Erie and I'd pick up my associate's degree. Well, I had no trouble whatsoever there. I graduated magna cum laude.
All right.
And then in civil engineering, and then I went on to graduate school and I picked up my master's degree in civil engineering, and then I took a little time off, got married. My wife and I, we went to live in Connecticut, worked for Pratt & Whitney Aircraft in East Hartford, and got a little disenchanted with what was going on over there. So I went back to graduate school to work on my PhD. And as it always happens, it didn't happen because, a baby came along and it was very difficult. So I decided, I'd started before that, 1970 or so, I decided to try what was called Cornell Aeronautical Laboratory over on Genesee Street, now known as Calspan Corporation. But I went there thinking, okay, I'll be there for a year or two, and then I'll go back to UB and work on my PhD. It never happened. So I did leave there twice for very brief periods of time, but in all, I had about 33 years of experience.
How did you get into the UFO study?
The UFO study started when I was, probably in ninth grade or so, 9th or 10th grade. We had these little book clubs or something, and the paperbacks then were only 25 cents or so. That shows how old I am. And so there was one. It was written by a guy named Captain Edward J. Ruppelt, who had completed his tenure as the head of what was called Project Blue Book. This is the Air Force's so-called public inquiry into the flying saucer or UFO phenomenon. I was just totally mesmerized by the subject matter. Yeah. I began scanning the newspaper or the Niagara Falls Gazette, and occasionally when my father would get at the Buffalo Courier Express for any articles whatsoever on UFOs, I'd clip them out, I'd put them in a little notebook, and then I joined an organization called NICAP, the National Investigations Committee on Aerial Phenomena, which was formed around 1960. They're Washington-based. And I was pretty much passive for many, 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 many years, just reading about it, buying books, reading the journals that these private UFO investigatory groups put out. And then, for years and years and years. And then I had some time. There was one sighting in particular, 1965, I think it was the August 21st, 1965 edition of the Buffalo News. They mentioned that an unknown object had landed in a place called Cherry Creek, New York. I didn't have a clue where this place was. And I was just enthralled because everything else I had seen before was just lights in the sky or anomalous objects traversing the sky. But here was a bona fide landing. And it always intrigued me, but I never really found out much about it. The newspaper coverage It was like one article, and the Gazette had an article.
Typical.
And so I sort of forgot about it at the time, but then
you got fired up by that.
I got fired up by it, and then I did read in the UFO Investigator, which was the monthly news letter of NICAP. They had a summary of what happened there. And over the years, I found some books started mentioning it, and maybe about a half a dozen books cited the case. But it really wasn't until 1960 or 1995 I had some free time, translated into I was laid off from my job at Calspan because I just didn't have any work to do. And so I had some free time to mess around, and I decided, well, I'm going to go and take a look at this Cherry Creek sighting and see if I can find out what really went on.
Fantastic. We're going to get into the Cherry Creek event in depth, and I suspect there's more there. I believe we are probably speaking to the world expert on that subject of the Cherry Creek incident in 1965. I mean, we'd say safely that that's the most dramatic UFO incident in Western New York, for sure.
No question. The odd thing about it, though, Mason, is very few people know about it. Even though it is one of the 600-odd sightings that are classified as unidentified by the U.S. Air Force out of the 12,500 they supposedly investigated. And that in itself is fascinating, is why they classified it this way. And we'll get into it later.
Yeah, I heard it was fairly controversial, and I'm hoping we find that out. But first, Bob, before we go any further, I need to ask you a question.
Mm-hmm.
What does the term unidentified flying object, UFO, what does that connote to you? What do you...
Okay, well, let me just preface that by saying, if you ask most people, they'll say UFO, they will say spaceship, something from outer space. These are your UFO enthusiasts, your buffs. And it turns out that most of them are pretty much dewy-eyed believers. Okay, and then if you talk to the other side, the skeptics, there's nothing to it. They're misidentifications. They are they're probably caused by some physiological problem. You've got bad eyesight, psychological problem. You're a little screwy, or maybe they're just hoaxed. But to me, and to most serious researchers, like people at the former Center for UFO Studies based in Chicago, a UFO is an extraordinary, and there's a lot in that word itself, an extraordinary apparent object or configuration of lights or object with lights that remains unexplained even after competent analysis by experts who should know what they're doing. Okay, it doesn't matter if it's unexplained to the witnesses.
Yes.
It is after thorough analysis. If you can't explain it.
People tracking weather patterns,
yes.
flight patterns,
yes, exactly.
Astronomical displays, comets,
exactly.
Ruling them all out.
Exactly. And then you're left with the UFO. However, that to me, that designation is provisional, because there have been some cases where additional information came to light. Maybe people got access to some government documents that are not available at the time. These UFOs became identified flying objects, but they were unknown to the
like
the public.
Like a murder case, they're solved later.
Yes, a cold case that can come back, and it can be the whole evaluation can be changed.
Sure. Yeah. I think that's a great definition. I'll use it myself in the future.
Okay.
Bob, every once in a while, one of our guests on Twilight and the Western Door will be subjected to the Twilight Top 10 challenge.
Mm-hmm.
Bob, my friend, are you now willing to respond to the Top 10 challenge?
As the incomparable Sarah Palin once said, you betcha.
All right, now let's not get political, Bob, but here we go.
I really don't care for her, so.
All right. Well, maybe I'm psychic, but I'm picking that up.
Okay.
So let me ask you this. The Men in Black, they're very, they've done some hysterical film. Well, one really hysterical film about them. I'll get opinionated and tell you that was the best one, was the first one. But there have been a couple of flaps in various places in Western New York, upstate New York, concerning Men in Black. Have you ever heard of anything like that? Do you believe it?
I have heard of the Men in Black as far back as probably the 60s. It all started when a character by the name of Alfred B. Bender or something like that, who was, let's say, his... not of his mental prowess, but his critical thinking skills were quite low. Started to believe that some unknown agents were after them, and they were clothed in black, and they came in threes, and they were really had sinister purposes.
Really?
And then
sure they weren't just dictionary salesmen or Mormon missionaries. I don't know. They dress up sometimes.
They could be, but according to him, it was a legitimate bunch of people who were after this guy. He's probably paranoid. But actually, and another author by the name of Gray Barker, who himself was a very, very controversial author, but he picked it up and he started to propagate the whole legend of the Men in Black. Sure. And then throughout these stories were quite prevalent in the 60s and even into the 70s. An author by the name of John Keel went on and talked about in his experiences. He always ran into the Men in Black, claimed he was chasing them in the car.
Keel.
John Keel, yes. I mean, God bless him. Bless his soul. He's no longer with us. But you had to take what John said with a huge amount of salt.
Sure.
But then the thing is, a lot of them, the stories are silly. I mean...
So you're telling me you probably don't have a lot of faith in the objective existence of the Men in Black?
Well, I would say, for the most part, no, but there is a chance that there are government agents who flex their muscles and show up to intimidate witnesses. There could be some legitimate people. In this case, they are people per se. Now, the Men in Black of Storyland, these people are weird-looking characters. They're cadaverous, tall. They wear clothing that is like 30 years out of date. They wear a zoot suit,
And only we will know. In other words, right. That's not a very good disguise.
And what the thing, these people have wires coming out of their body. They don't know how to eat Jell-O. They can't cut a steak. They are very awkward. One guy went in there and was interviewing a couple who had a UFO experience, and then his voice started trailing off, and he said that he had to have his batteries recharged, and he ran out the door.
Well, all right. I think I get the picture on that.
Okay.
Item 2 on our top 10 challenge. Okay. There's everybody's heard of the Bermuda Triangle, and one of the major factors of it has been the UFO experience, and indeed many people think that's the source of the Bermuda Triangle mystery. But I think in the 1970s, a pilot named Jay Gorley wrote a book called The Great Lakes Triangle, and he made a seemingly persuasive case that the Great Lakes Triangle may be even more powerful per square mile than the Bermuda Triangle. And the UFO experience was very strong there. Have you heard anything about that? And what are your opinions on the Great Lakes Triangle?
Yeah, I can't recall if I read that book. If I did, it was maybe 30 years ago, 40 years ago. But I think it came out in the 70s. But anyways, I have heard of enough UFO sightings around the lakes. Lake Ontario, for example. There's a woman up who lives in Niagara-on-the-Lake. I wish I remembered her name, but she has a website devoted to sightings of orbs and lights and apparent objects and blobs of light, points of love, cavorting over the lake. She's got accounts of a platform coming out of Lake Ontario, just outside of Mississauga, and that looks some type of object took off from it. She's got documented on her sites. Things going into the lake. Then we've got, in fact, a friend of mine, two friends of mine. I used to belong to a group in the late 80s, early 90s. It was a MUFON group. They actually had video taken by themselves of two blobs of light that started to come toward each other. They merged, and then they separated and went their separate ways. And it turns out that several years later, somebody broke into their condo. They were living in the East Amherst, and the only thing they took was the videotape of the.
That's fantastic!
It's fantastic. You wonder why. I mean, how would they know where it is? It's not like an inside job or something.
When we're done today,
yes.
off the record, I'd like to know if you know who those people are.
Oh, I do.
Well, don't tell me now.
Okay.
Tell me a little bit later. What about the black helicopters? Have you ever heard anything about those?
God, yes.
Do you believe it?
The reason I think there's some credibility to it is because a good friend of mine who is he used to be a teacher at one of the Catholic schools in the Buffalo area, and he's now out teaching at a high school in the southern part of the county. He actually claimed that he used to meet at our house. We used to.
Did he see black helicopters?
Yes, he did. He was pursued by them.
Well, how'd he get away?
Well, he got home and they were gone.
Oh.
And he also told the story that his wife and his mother-in-law were driving in the Orchard Park. I guess it's in the vicinity of Orchard Park Road, near Ellicott Road out over there. There's there used to be an ice cream stand out over there, and the helicopter swooped down on them and scared the living hell out of them. And I have seen myself and a friend of mine. We were over at Calspan. I used to have a office right off Genesee Street. You could look out the window, and we used to see a bunch of helicopters pass over our building, heading south toward who knows where, and there was no markings on them. We had 7x50 binoculars. We could see nothing on them.
So okay. Well, I'm glad to hear that. So,
but other people. Yes, and also another one is that again, another lady who belongs to our UFO group. She was actually buzzed by the helicopters down in Allegheny State Park.
She said.
Well, she and three other witnesses.
Aha. Well, it's more persuasive now.
Yeah.
Let me ask you about item 4. The abduction experience.
Okay.
I know we get a little chuckle about this, but I just need to ask you for the record, do you think, have you heard of any serious abduction experiences in Western New York?
Yes.
Well, I'm sure they all would be serious if they're true, but do you buy it? What do you think?
I know several people who claim they've been abducted. On the surface, they are the nicest people. You would never doubt anything they say. They are very sincere, and they actually claim they have been taken. One person I know has been abducted repeatedly, even to the
says he's been abducted repeatedly.
His wife can provide some corroborating evidence to that, and he claims that he
coming home from the bar with a little lipstick on his collar, and he was abducted.
No, this guy, he's the type of guy. He works he's got a garage that he's into electronics. He's a really electronic whiz, and one day he's out there working on it, and they come to him repeatedly, maybe 1, 2 to several times a week, and they bother him. He once got so ticked off at him that he sprayed one of them with a can of oil.
Well, now that's very interesting. Okay,
and there's more for him, but
so in other words, there's a bit of
Yes.
living folklore out there.
Yes.
But you yourself don't sound extremely convinced that people actually are abducted by UFOs.
No, but there's so many red flags that go up because there's so many of them, not only here in Western New York, the United States, throughout the world, and there's and the stories are there are common elements, common threads in them, but it just seems incomprehensible that assuming that that the people behind this are continuously doing this. Why are they doing it over and over and over again? Why don't they just hover above a blood bank and get their samples?
Yeah. Why do they keep letting us go? Is it like fishing or what?
Well, sometimes I thought maybe the people they let go are the rejects.
Oh, that's right.
Because a lot of people disappear mysteriously, and you don't know where the hell they went.
Yeah. Well, that's a good point. Yeah, I'm gonna have to make sure I
check that
watch
out
it when I'm out walking.
You never know.
Our fifth question concerns the subject of underwater UFO bases. Mm-hmm. Now, I think that would be fascinating if there should be such a thing. Do you have any reaction to this subject in Lakes Erie or Ontario, the underwater bases?
Well, based on incidentally, the website for the woman who collects all these is called Orbwatch. Go to orbwatch.com.
I'll track her down.
Okay, and she has, again, many accounts of things going, of objects or light forms going into the lake and coming out. Also, there's reports of the same thing happening in Lake Erie. So if indeed, why are they going in there? If they're just going in there to cool off or something, or gather some water. That's right. So and there's there's a gentleman who lives in, I believe, New Jersey. His name is Carl Feindt. I think it's Fiendt. He specializes in underwater UFO accounts. I heard him speak at a lecture in Maryland, maybe, I don't know, 9 years ago, something like that. He is fascinating, and you can go to his website too. I mean, there's just a numerous accounts of underwater UFOs. I guess we could say there might be bases because the Earth is what? I mean, was it 70% ocean or something like that? And vast areas have never been explored. Yeah. And it's possible.
Plus, if you can cross the galaxies and figure out a way to dive into the water, it's probably not going to be hard for you to develop a cloaking device or just build yourself an underwater cave and hide out there.
If mere humans like us can cloak ourselves with stealth technology, they can do it too, assuming there is a they that's doing it. Yeah. I always have to throw these caveats in there because I'm not convinced that the phenomenon has an extraterrestrial explanation.
I just think that's such a nifty style of objectivity to maintain, because I think in every subject, we need to be looking underneath the surface, and we need to, I think, be careful not to accept other people's theories for things. I mean, maybe the phenomenon they're describing is true, but the spin you put on it is one thing. Some of the time, the phenomena isn't true.
I also say that people put the cart before the horse when you say they're extraterrestrials or occupants are controlling or driving these devices. Heck, we don't know what the devices are, or if indeed they are devices.
Could be like just a couple of hamsters out on a lark. They're our version of the mouse in the cage spinning the wheel.
I have this feeling that some wild-eyed enthusiasts will be turning the show off because I burst their bubble, I think.
Well, I think there might be a few more listeners who are interested in the objective truth who might enjoy it all the more because of that. I can only tell you that I'm one of them. I've enjoyed the first half of our hour, and we'll get back to our top 10 list. I can hear our haunting and mysterious credits fading in, courtesy of the Afro-Celt sound system, a band we admire very much.
You're listening to Go Podcast Yourself Network.
Let's go check it out
at gopodcastyourself.com. And we love you.
Hi again, this is Mason Winfield, the host of Twilight on the Western Door, a program of interviews and discussions with cutting-edge experts into the varied subjects of the sacred, the psychic, the supernatural, the paranormal. This evening, we are having our discussion with our highly informed guest, Bob Galganski. We're discussing, in general, the UFO mysterious phenomena category right now, and we've commenced with our Top 10 challenge, and Bob's answers have been so interesting and so developed that we're only about halfway through it. I would like to comment briefly just for myself right now that I'm a very casual student of the UFO phenomena in upstate New York, which is my territory. I mean, I'm at the beginning level of that sort of study, and I would have to confess that I'm not that interested in it. I tend to leave it to my expert friends like Bob and Phil Hazley. But one of the things that's impressed me the most, curiously, about the UFO material is that there doesn't seem to be any central source of information. In other words, or else I just haven't found it, but I've looked. And with a lot of other subjects, there's even paranormal ones, there's sort of a generally regarded, this is the authority. This is the source that's read everything else and done its best to collate. And I would say if you're looking for either world UFO material or even Western New York UFO material, I can't think of a centralized book or database or anything. My friend Bob, do you know of any sort of a centralized source for this material, or are the researchers generally as flaky as the subject?
There are several sources. One of the earliest one is called UFOCat, and it's a catalog of UFO sightings that was compiled by the Center for UFO Studies in Chicago. The problem is the database contains a lot of what they call so-called IFOs, identified flying objects. And it's, in a sense, then it's contaminated, because if you want to do any type of a pattern analysis, if you want to query the database to look for certain tendencies, trends, characteristics, it tends to be inherently erroneous. And but it is good. It contains a lot of material if you are looking for similar reports. Another one is the MUFON, the Mutual UFO Network, which is now headquartered, I guess, in Louisville, Kentucky. They have a database that their investigators, and that would include me, can access. But there is a lot to be desired about it. There's gaps in it. It's in some cases the reports are not very good. So what they are doing now is they're trying to solicit money from members, any rich people out there who have nothing else to do with their money, to try to upgrade this database so it becomes useful, so people from all over the world can use it for their own personal studies. But there is, again, the problem is, in any scientific endeavor, there is a body of knowledge that everybody agrees on. And the UFO community, no. One researcher will agree with, will be a champion of one sighting, and the other one will just diss it. And even in photographic analysis, one will say, yeah, it's genuine, and the other will say it's bogus. And so there's this, who is the final arbiter in this? We don't have it. And that is one of the reasons that ufology, if indeed you could call what we do that, is it's sort of helter-skelter. And then and the whole problem is you're plagued with kooks who are continually in it, to either gum up the works, to just to they probably have some ulterior motives. They could be wanting to sell their book, or else they just want to gum up the works. And if you get maybe you could even say that the government is encouraging some of this to discredit any of the more reliable sightings.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah.
Huh.
I mean, because way back when the so-called contactees were on the scene, that would be starting in the 50s and a little bit into the 60s or so. People like George Adamski, Angelucci,
Betty
God.
and Barney Hill fit in there?
No, they're different. They're different. There's something different about them. We can even get into that if you want. But the contactees were basically con men who they put on a media show. They said that they got inside the spaceships, and that incidentally was the name of George Adamski's first book, where they befriended these people. They were taken into their confidence. They went for trips to the moon, to Venus of all places, to Jupiter, to Saturn. They would sit down to the king of the moon and have dinner with them. And it was so ludicrous that it just drove the serious researchers crazy. And I could just see the skeptics, the scientific community, the government just applauding all of this.
Same thing is going on in the ghost business. There's parapsychology, and then there's TV ghost hunting.
Yeah.
And they're light years apart, and the trouble is the general public very seldom gets it. Well, let's get back to the second half of our Twilight Top 10 challenge. Bob, in I believe it was November 1965, there was a massive electrical disaster at the Niagara Falls power plants. It basically blew out the electricity for most of the Northeast, didn't it?
Yes, it did.
And I've heard the rumor that this may have been connected to not connected, but it was contemporaneous with a UFO sighting. Do you know anything about that? And if so, could there be any significance to it?
Yeah, again, there's no, you could say there was no causal effect, but there are UFOs were sighted. They were sighted over I believe the Adam Beck power station. I guess that would be on the Canadian side, if I'm not mistaken, seen by the people on the American side of the of the river. And these, they were not points of light. They were like glowing balls of light that were sort of cavorting over the plant. And it just so happened to be that the outage, which they ultimately traced down, was they said a breaker was tripped at the Beck generating plant, and it happened to be around the same time. I don't know how close, I'd have to go into that, but same time as these things were sighted. Now, further down the trunk lines, the power being transmitted to the east, I believe, around somewhere in the Syracuse area, they saw balls of light flitting around some of the high tension wires there, and there were, I believe, also that. I'm not 100% sure of this, but because someday I plan to look into this in more detail, but I believe there was a pilot coming into what was just called Buffalo Airport at the time who also spotted some lights over the power generating plant. Now, I don't know whether it's the same ones that the people at the Niagara Falls plant saw over the Beck plant or not, but no, there's certainly a number of sightings. But again, you cannot jump to conclusions and say, yes, they caused it.
Sure.
At least I can't.
Well, no, I think that's a very interesting reaction. I'm wondering if I could maybe follow up to that.
Mm-hmm.
I've heard reports from the same time period about from Lewiston, which would be about 10 miles away. And these lights, is it possible they could have been connected with the incident itself? In other words, they're not alien spacecraft. Is it logical that if there's a breakdown in the natural system there, one of the manifestations that it could pitch out were lights in the sky? I don't know.
It could be what's called balls of plasma, which is basically energized balls of gas, and some of them, the so-called ball lightning which is very small and it's not as luminous. But I've actually seen ball lightning myself.
You have?
Yes, before a thunderstorm, sitting on the porch in my house in West Seneca, I saw what looked like a grapefruit-size orange, very dull sphere going down on the street, right on the top of the road for maybe 20 to 30 feet, and it had just poof went out.
Wow! Would that thing have been dangerous to touch it? I mean,
I don't know, but there are people who have, I guess, come in close proximity to these things. There was a ball of light on an airplane, believe it or not, which would be pretty scary. And I may be wrong here. I believe that somebody may have suffered some minor burns or so. It may be, yeah.
Well, let's get to item 7. There is a rumor out there that what they often call the Niagara Corridor, which is basically a north-south 35-mile-long line that represents the Niagara River. I mean, it's basically fairly straight. Mm-hmm. And there are people who've asserted that this is a major zone for UFO sightings. Mm-hmm. Is there anything to that, in your opinion?
There might be, because as I mentioned at the outset of the program here, when I was a kid and first getting into this whole subject, reading the Gazette, there were always UFO sightings. And
which Gazette?
Niagara Falls Gazette.
Oh,
yeah.
They're good friends of the supernatural. That paper has traditionally done some wonderful recycling of local folklore.
Did you ever hear of Bill Nelson, who worked out there in the 60s?
Oh, sure.
Yeah, he was one of the few guys who actually had the cojones to actually stand up and to actually write about it. And I remember at the time I sent him a letter, and I was afraid to identify myself who I was, because I didn't want my name in a paper, so I called myself UFO Believer. But I gave him a series of facts. I put him in touch with Nycamp, and he worked as a technical writer over Bell Aerosystems.
Oh,
former Marine in combat. I met him actually in his latter years too. He wrote a book. Which was sort of that's one of the published on cheap paper, which is probably a classic today. I don't know if you ever saw it or not. I should show it to you.
Which book?
He wrote a book about
Bill Nelson.
Yeah, Bill Nelson's book. Yeah, but I forgot. I lost my train of thought. What did you ask me?
We were talking about the Niagara Corridor.
Okay, yeah,
and whether it's a UFO zone.
Yeah, a lot of sightings there. And again, with my own experience with Cherry Creek, having gone there time after time, repeatedly trying to track down some of the residents who were there at the time, not only did they know of the sightings then, but they had their own sightings, which spans decades. After the 65 event, before the 65 event, and again, people in our local UFO group. Who've had experiences down in the Allegheny State Park area, and then I've heard of reports down in northwestern Pennsylvania, the Bradford area. I don't know if you can continue that corridor southward.
I think that gesture has been made, because if you look on the map, go straight south down the Niagara River, straight south, and keep it going, and you're heading right down this area they call the Chestnut Ridge when it's in Pennsylvania, and it's It's very powerful. As long as you make the band broad enough.
Yes.
I mean, it's got to be. It can't be 1 mile wide. I mean, it's got to be about 5 miles.
Yeah, I'm not
to 10
sure
wide.
about the Kecksburg event too, and I don't. That's outside of Pittsburgh, would be west of Pittsburgh, and that may be in that zone too.
It would be.
Yeah. Now I know from your books now that you talked about that zone, but you're talking about other paranormal events. You're talking about Bigfoot. You're talking about ghosts. You're talking hauntings and
Yes.
Indian burial mounds and all that.
Well, there is a clustering effect with supernatural folklore, and it's well known to folklorists and it seems to change with the society and with the century, the subjects they talk about. But the basic contention is that certain places tend to pick up lots of supernatural stories, and the whole you can have dozens of square miles, hundreds of square miles that get no stories, and then you got this little area that gets them all.
Yeah. Well, you could explain that as maybe the people there are aware of this and they are more in tune to report it. But
folklore can build on folklore.
Yes,
You've
exactly.
always got to watch out for that.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, from my perspective as a researcher in my subject areas, you can't say that someone didn't tell you a story. And if you're deciding to make your pattern, you don't know whether the story's true, you don't know whether it isn't, but if you're deciding to make your criteria, did somebody tell me a story about it or not? And that's what you write about, and that's what you observe in your patterns, because I think that does count.
Actually, you probably found the same thing in your experience. You're talking to somebody, and if they gain your confidence, they will tell you a story about the experience that they've told nobody before.
Yeah.
And I've heard countless stories. People
Those
I
are my
work with.
favorites.
Yeah.
It's tough dragging it out, and here you go. That's one of your best witnesses. The only better witness than you yourself seeing something is that reluctant one.
Somebody who never told anybody before.
Yeah. So I'm gonna take that as a qualified yes, that it's quite likely that the Niagara Corridor is a zone for at least reports.
I would say so. It's statistically more probable than elsewhere, I guess.
Sure.
Say that.
Cool. Well, hold on to your hats. We're on to our 8th topic, which could be one of the more controversial ones. You notice I stacked these so that the wackier they are, they come at the end. But this one may not be all that wacky. What do you think about the connection between UFO sightings and Bigfoot reports?
Yeah, Stan Gordon, who is probably one of the best combination UFO Bigfoot researchers.
He's a wonderful researcher.
He is, yeah. He spoke over at Niagara County Community College. I've gone to a couple of his other lectures. I've communicated with him. He's been in it, I think, ever since '65, the Kecksburg thing. He has a collection of stories, and several of them do touch upon UFOs being sighted in conjunction with big feet, I guess you would call them.
Bigfoots, who
Big
knows?
foots, yes. Big-footed things.
Sasquatches.
Yeah, Sasquatches.
That's easier to make a plural out of.
Sasquatchi.
Possible.
But no, yeah, but the percentage of sightings is so small, it's so minuscule, I cannot afford to focus on that. Some people do think there's a correlation there. I think there could be, but if it's not one of the prevalent characteristics,
Sure. Well, as far as I'm concerned, any connection ever at all between an extraterrestrial vehicle and a hairy, big-ass ape that isn't supposed to be there in the first place, I would say if it happens once in the folklore, it's curious.
Unless, as some people say, the Bigfoot, big feet, are the pets of the extraterrestrials.
Well, and the answer, if you ask them, well, gee, where does it sleep? The answer would be anywhere at once, probably, right?
Do they pick up their scat?
So, in other words, all right, Bob, let's not get quite that merry.
I'm enjoying this, you can tell.
Well, I am too.
Yes, okay.
And okay, here's another one that will probably lend itself to multiple interpretations. But you notice that in the TV programs on the UFO material, which I virtually never watch. I don't, ever. But, I'm familiar with what goes on. There's a whole mythology out there. I mean, unless it's true. There's a whole mythology out there about various cultures or races or whatever of alien beings that are currently having some interest in the Earth. And they give them names like Nordics and Greys and Reptilians. Do you make anything out of that at all?
Well, according to Whitley Strieber, who probably wrote the book that really touched a nerve with people all over the world, with has a drawing of these of the alien face on the cover. He claimed to have run into several different kinds. One was the general issue gray, the very 3 to 4 foot high humanoids with a huge head, the oblong eyes with no pupils, nostrils without a nose, holes for ears, no slit with no teeth, and very slender appendages who appear to be very weak. Those were sort of like workers. And then there was this another being who seems to be in charge, who could be, I'm not sure if he said it was a reptilian or not, but in many cases the abductees will talk about a reptilian who seems to be in charge of things. And then there are other cases, like in the Travis Walton case, where he was taken by, or at least when he woke up after being zapped and pulled into this alleged spaceship, when he regained consciousness, he saw these typical so-called these grays, these small guys coming after him, and he scared them away, and he ran down the corridor, and then he saw this what looked like a normal human being in a spacesuit, with the transparent diving bell helmet on. Thought I'm rescued, okay, I'm going to be okay. And winds up, they take him to a table and they gas him, and Lord knows what he'd do. They did to him afterwards, and he finds himself on the side of the road outside of Heber, Arizona. After all that, but yeah, there are many more cases of the Nordics. I'm not exactly
reports of the
Nordics, and then there's other ones of God. What happened in the early 50s, 54 in France, there was an outbreak of sightings of these little dwarves who would be seen on railroad tracks. And in one case, they snatched some flowers away from a farmer's wife who went to pick some, and they all disappeared into their little diving bell type object and took off. And the dwarves were quite prevalent in the 50s in Europe. And there's all kinds, and some people claim there's distinctions. And of course, we got the contactees in Venusians, and the people from Zeta Reticuli, and all the other kinds.
So they make up names for these.
Yes, they do.
Zeta Reticuli is
and they explain them, they rationalize them as saying, well, you got several races of people and different civilizations coming over here, and they're attracted to us for some reason. And I don't know why. Maybe because we're so warlike. I don't know, but we think they're crazy or something. But we're crazy. But that's how they rationalize them. I don't know. The human mind, of course, I am no expert in this, but the human mind sees what it wants to see, or it creates a vision of what it wants to see to perhaps offset some scary sight. So it could be that people who see the Nordics don't want to see the Greys or the reptilians if they exist.
Sure.
So there's a lot of them there. The whole thing, the whole abduction thing is as to quote Stanton Friedman, in my gray basket. I don't know what to make of it, honestly. It's not my bailiwick.
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, I don't blame you. It wouldn't be an area I'd want to forge into either.
I have enough problems trying to figure out what the UFOs are. Are they solid objects? Are they projections? Are they from another dimension? Are they time travelers? What the hell are they?
Yeah.
Or could they be some civilization here on Earth? I don't know, who's been here and maybe live under the ocean or something. I don't know.
Sure. The Atlanteans.
The Atlanteans.
Oh, don't
or
forget
the Lemurians. Don't forget about
the
Lemurians.
Yeah, that's a long name.
Oh, from the Mu. The Mu
yeah,
people.
I devoured those books when I was a kid by, I think, Colonel Churchward. And, he was just making the whole thing up. He'd take a photograph of he'd do an etching off of a wall carving in the Maya territory and go, look at that, there's an astronaut. Well, no, he wasn't big on the astronauts. But
he wasn't as bad as Von Däniken.
Oh, Eric Von Däniken. I often tell people, and I've got no desire to want to pick on Von Däniken. I mean, I'd get, no resentment for him whatsoever.
I wish I had money made from his books, I'll tell you that.
Well, I could use some of that too, but the trick is I just can't make up a whopper and sell it to you as if it's true. But Von Däniken, if you've ever seen the video of him being grilled by some professional archaeologists and anthropologists, and they're not vindictive people, they're just trying to say, look, you can't take a novice like Von Däniken and walk in front of a 2,000-year-old rock carving by a completely different world society and interpret it. You don't know what it means in its context. You're not prepared to say what the image means and to walk up and go, see, there's a alien, yep, there's another one. It's naive. It's underestimating the discipline that's there.
Some of the photos he published were cropped to show the things he wanted to see.
That's helpful. You should have gone into politics. They do a lot of chopping and cutting and pasting there.
Oh, yeah.
Hey, we're on to our last question, and it's very probably going to be the final one we get to today. I'm going to ask you, I'm going to return to one of my favorite subjects, which is the ancient power places in the earth, the places that pre-industrial societies, that the people that were here before us would have said, oh, that's a powerful place. You're going to, we talked about the clustering effect of folklore. You're going to see everything over there. Have you ever heard of a connection between UFO sightings and these ancient power places in upstate New York? Hills, valleys, swamps, where the Native American people had powerful legends.
The only I know there's an Indian burial mound up in Lewiston near Art Park.
Yes,
but I don't know if any UFO sightings.
They're in fact mysterious lights.
Mysterious lights.
Anomalous light phenomena was indeed reported above that mound. It was a guy walking his dog. If my memory keeps me well informed, it was a guy walking his dog right about the time of the power blackout. He saw some mysterious orange lights above that mount. I should point out that in Mount Morris, along the Genesee River, in Letchworth State Park, there's a hill there called Squawky Hill. And the Seneca always thought it was haunted. Major legends about Squawky Hill. And I hear there have been many UFO sightings from campers up there. The Allegheny State Park is a powerful region.
Now, Ellicottville, there was a spate of sightings back there, I believe, it may have been the early to mid-'90s that was actually made a column by Don Esmond in the Buffalo News.
Yes.
And
fine writer.
And and he treated it, I think, semi-seriously. Anyways.
Reasonably respectfully, sure.
And the local paper at the time, I forget the name of it. I don't know if it's still extant, but the Elephant, whatever it is, there was a writer by the name of. Her last name was Fisher. She wrote a lot of articles about it, and people were seeing not only lights there, but they were seeing box-like objects over one of the hills there.
Well, let me cut you regretfully short there, because as far as anyone knows, there was no Native American settlement in Ellicottville. There were no. If there's a ancient monument or a power hill down there, we don't know it, but. I figured that might be a little out of discipline for you, and we'll confer at another time. Well, Bob, we're getting fairly close to our conclusion here, and we didn't get halfway where we were planning to. You're just so informed. I've respected you for a long time, but
You flatter me.
you've, and I respect that humility. I respect that more too. So thank you so much, Bob, for being with us. This is Mason Winfield of Twilight on the Western Door. We're just going to have Bob Galganski back real soon. But for the moment, I have to thank a few people. I can hear our mysterious and entrancing closing credits fading in, for which we thank the Afro-Celt Sound System, a Scottish African fusion band that we admire so much. Their music sounds like what we mean: mood, merging, and mysticism. We thank them for their work as we thank Chris Starr, Carolyn Smith, and the whole GPY Radio Go Podcast Yourself network. Most of all, we thank our highly informed guest, my friend Bob Galganski. You can contact Bob for speaking events through our website and Facebook page, Twilight on the Western Door. We'll put you right in touch with him. Otherwise, until we meet again, shine in that light whose smile kindles the universe. Work every day to make this a better world.